Hello and welcome to the Small Business Briefing. I'm Brian Kelly, the CEO of the Small Business Association of Michigan.
Good afternoon. Thanks for joining us today. I'm Sarah Miller, Vice President of Marketing and Strategic Communications. I hope you had a nice Thanksgiving and got out into a little shopping on Small Business Saturday. As we get started today, I do want to welcome one of our new members, Avante Enterprises, located in Livonia. So welcome to Timothy Starks and the Avante Enterprises team. And of course, we are welcoming them on behalf of our sponsor, Consumers Credit Union. Check them out at consumerscu.org. So let's start out today's show, Brian, with an update on the Ford plant in Marshall. Once the strike was settled, the project resumed, but there have been some changes. So can you tell us what's changing, and are there any implications to that large tax incentive?
Yeah, this was a deal that came about with a pretty big package, actually a record large package from the state government in order to woo it to locate here in Michigan. Ended up being in Marshall. Now, during that strike, about a week or about maybe 2 weeks after that, the UAW strike had started. That project was put on hold, and a lot of people didn't notice that Ford hadn't announced that it had restarted until just a few days ago, and or right before Thanksgiving, and but it was with changes, and those changes are for the overall capacity of the plant to be scaled back by about 43% and about a third fewer, about 800 fewer jobs than originally called for. So they are resuming the project. It's still a massive project. There's still about 1,700 jobs that come along with it, but it was going to be 2,500. And presumably there will be a renegotiation of the tax credits. Tax credits directly tied to the number of jobs created. And so now I think we have to assume that those incentives will be scaled back, although no announcements have yet been made.
All right, and any insight into why they're making these changes?
Well, I think Ford is just in a position where they have to be practical here, that the market for electric vehicles has not taken off like some thought that it would. There are a lot of government incentives behind, subsidies behind both production and also purchase of these vehicles, and it just hasn't had the type of activity that they've seen before. In addition to that, now with the new UAW contract, they've taken on a lot of new expenses. And that requires them to maximize the amount of profit in order for them to cover those expenses. They lose money in electric vehicles. They make money on the gas vehicles and the hybrids. So it really puts them in a position where they have to shift more of their activity more toward the places where they are currently profitable in order to pay for the contract that they just entered into. So those two things, I think, really caused Ford to scale back. Probably principally just the lack of demand. There wasn't as much demand as was anticipated, but then on top of that, just the practical need for them to maximize the amount of profit.
All right. We do have a special guest joining us today, Van Martin. Brian, I will turn it over to you to introduce him and have a conversation about real estate here in Mid-Michigan.
Absolutely. So very excited to have as a guest on the show today, Van Martin. And you won't find anybody who knows commercial real estate like he does. And so Martin Commercial Real Estate. And so we just wanted to talk about the reason that I thought to invite him on the show today was because of a report. It's called The Top 10 Issues Affecting Real Estate. And it has several really weighty issues that are addressed in there. The sorts of things that are really kind of outside of the control, certainly of small business owners, things like political unrest, global economic health, global housing shortage, lots of critical concerns in there. So I thought we'd start out by maybe asking if you would just elaborate on some of those challenges, the impact that they'll have, how they exacerbate the challenges in the real estate market, and even it even seems like maybe they would kind of pile up one on top of the other. Oh, you're muted there still, Van.
There we go. Yeah, certainly a lot of challenges, facing all of small business and business in general, for that matter. I mean, you can kind of, run right through it in terms of what's going on globally with all the political unrest, and the global economic, health that's out there. A lot of volatility, uncertainty, and economic risk, that we're all facing. If you turn back the clock a year, we're all focused on, Russia's invasion of Ukraine, for example. You fast forward a year to perhaps where we are today, and we're looking more internally at home with all the uncertainty that's going on with, interest rates, affordability of capital, inverted yield curves that are happening. So we've got our own issues that we're dealing with at home. Most people, everybody's talking about office, right? What's the how is that going to play out in terms of the future of hybrid work? What does that look like? I think what's clear is that the pandemic created permanent shifts in the workplace environment. At the peak we had about 62% of employees that worked from the office. We went through the pandemic, those percentages changed, and here we are today, and we're kind of back to where we were. We're at about 58-60% of workers are back in the office. 29% or so still have a hybrid work from home. And there's about 12 or 13% that are permanently kind of in a hybrid work component. But I would say everybody asks me that question: where do you go? Say, what's up with the office? And I guess it's evolving, and it's going to continue to evolve as people determine what their workplace strategies are. When they determine certain things, what type of tasks can have to be performed in the office, which ones can be performed remotely. And I think everybody's feeling their way. Certainly a download of information on this particular topic that we see constantly, and we have since the pandemic. There's all sorts of other little things that are impacting us. AI, what's going on with AI? Everybody's talking about ChatGPT, the impact that this could have on commercial real estate, number of implications there. Originally when they were getting into this, and obviously it's been there for a bit. Originally kind of the AI 1.0 was kind of a the data matrices were kind of a compare matrix, and it went into AI 2.0, which was more of a forecasting matrix that was led by I think Ray Tordo and Bill Wheaton from the CBRE Econometric Forecasting Group. And now with the new AI 3.0, we're more into the probabilistic, modeling type we're doing, where it's bringing all this together. And, it's kind of has a, people want to know, they want to be able to predict, with, a high degree of accuracy, what the most probable outcome, will be. So a lot of this is evolving. People say, you got to be in the front end of this AI. I don't know. It's high end stuff, maybe above, where I'm thinking, but, this particular group, the CRE, the Counselors of Real Estate, it's kind of a think tank group. And so they do try to go, deep on this stuff. Other topics, the labor shortage that we all face, everybody says, it's difficult to find an employee, and difficult to find the one with the skill set you want, and somebody that's willing and able to work, they actually show up. But employers continue to struggle in this arena. And there's a lot of change. There's a lot of dislocation. There's, the demographics are changing, depending on if you're X, Y, or Z, and what their attitudes are towards work. The interesting thing, when I got into the business, you found a job that you like. That's where you went. Now they find a place they want to live. That's where they go. And then they make the determination of, what kind of job, is going to, fit, their particular skill set. And they can do it because they can work for a company in San Francisco and live in Florida. And, it's changed, and all these things are changing. Other topics that are hot, is housing, the shortage of housing. We're looking at about, I don't know, 4.3 million units short of in the multifamily. We're looking at about 6.8 million housing gap in the single family, housing. People got to deal with affordability. There's less supply. People don't want to sell their house. They're going to have to go to a higher interest rate. They have a lower interest rate now, or perhaps they have a no debt. So you're not seeing as many housing units going on the market, and it's impacting the turnover and the affordability for homeowners, and certainly for first-time homeowners. And that gets into the affordability housing discussion, and that's a big discussion. We could go down the road, on that, alone. The big items that get into things in the state of Michigan, supply chain, logistics, manufacturing, reshoring, onshoring, nearshoring, whatever terminology you would like to utilize. But everybody started to experience this during the pandemic when they couldn't get toilet paper per se. Well, those things have changed, and they're figuring out the supply chain, and the companies have, and they've changed their strategy. The majority of the products used to come in, through the LA and ports on the West Coast. That's flipped. A lot of them have come in. New York, I think, perhaps at this point in time is the busiest. But you're seeing that breaking down, from a geographic perspective. You see the ports down in Charleston. You see the ports in Savannah, the ports in Houston. You see the ports in Mobile. So they've kind of, spread that out with a different logistics, strategy. So that we don't face, these shortages of materials, and that will continue to evolve, also. The other one, I know we probably got to wrap up, that is, on the list is, I would just say is kind of this fork in the road that we've hit relative to, our infrastructure and what's going on. A lot of the states and federal government have passed, some significant, spending bills. I think 2 trillion, on infrastructure. And part of the question is where it's going and how it's going to be spent. Are we going to do it traditionally the way we did it in the 20th century? Or are we looking forward into the new ways that we have to address our infrastructure needs in terms of what we need here in North America? So I think that will continue to evolve. I guess the good point is that we've got money allocated and it will be spent, and hopefully we'll continue to fix the basic roads and then build for the future. So we'll see how that evolves. So I guess I'll just open it back up and see if you got any other questions you'd like to expound upon.
Yeah, absolutely. So a lot of big issues, a lot of really complex issues that are all interwoven together. Any of these things that you think are particularly underrated or maybe not talked about as much that are important that we ought to have on our radar screen?
Boy, I don't know. It's hard to underrate. Is anything in particular flying underneath the radar? I guess out of these, these top 10 issues that we're kind of focused on, I think, that's why they're on the list, because they're above the threshold, and these change. Obviously, 2-3 years ago we were talking about the pandemic, and that had the biggest impact on it. But no, I think people are focused on things and what's going on with population shifts, and companies certainly are, because they need workers and they have to follow these workers. And if they're moving to Florida or Texas or South Carolina, then that impacts their commercial real estate decisions on where they're going to locate. I don't know. I think smaller business, I know for us, dealing with something like AI it's a more difficult subject. How do we get our arms around it? And so maybe we put it off in the corner, and so maybe it's underneath our radar, and we're not dealing with it sufficiently or what have you. And in smaller business, as we know, it's more difficult, and we have less resources and time to work with it.
I think I'm going to go ahead and use this as an opportunity, Sarah, to ask that you share a link to register on Thursday at 1 o'clock. Any of our members can tune in and participate in a discussion around AI. And this is meant to be very basic. So let's say you feel like everybody's talking about this and everybody acts like they know so much and you don't know anything about it. This is for you. Okay. So this is like a beginner's, like, what are these things? Everybody keeps on saying Chat GPT. I feel like I already ought to know what that is or what it does or how to use it. And I don't. Tune in, because we don't, this is the sort of thing we don't want you to get too far behind, because being a little bit behind can turn into a lot behind with how fast things are moving. So I appreciate, Van, the setup for that. Why don't we let's touch back here. I'll make this our final question, but you had brought up, like, everybody's talking about office work, but also you shared some stats about people returning to the office. Looks and feels a little different than it used to be, a lot more hybrid type arrangements. But like in Lansing, or at least in downtown Lansing, it feels different, like a lot different, in terms of the amount of activity. I wonder if you could maybe share. I mean, it's the sort of thing where you think that we just kind of hunker down with the office space, or do you think that long term, just the very character and use of these spaces is going to change?
Well, yeah, again, office, and this is particular to our market locally, and we're here, and we live and breathe it every day right here, and it's different. If you're in a major urban area, or if you're a more tertiary, if we can qualify as a tertiary market in Lansing, but we've got 1 million square feet vacancy. May sound small in Manhattan, but Lansing is 30% of the market. So we've got a lot of buildings that are either sitting empty or have a lot of vacancy. And the question is, how do you bring those back to life? How, the vitality of those, the economic, well-being of those. And it's simply going to take time. I mean, downtown Lansing has to change, and, we need to add the vibrancy. We need to add the housing. We need to add the elements that are perhaps going to bring people back. But that's kind of against the trends that are going on. The trends going on is people are going to the suburbs. Okay, that's what happened back in the 60s. People are going to the suburbs, and they're going to the offices in the suburb because they're closer to the housing and they're closer to where the people are. And so that's what's happening. People aren't making the transit into the downtown markets. And I think Lansing is, it's got a little bit of that too. I mean, we got some exciting projects that are on the in the pipeline that, if come to fruition, would be great. But it's kind of like I have said, is that we need to get to a certain critical level where we're going to reach sustainability, where we can really support a vibrant downtown, and Lansing clearly at this point is not there yet. So there's a lot of plans. The DLI has been working. They put a plan together to bring some of this vibrancy and connectivity down. That's all good. As housing continues to evolve, that'll have a positive impact. We're going to have a new city hall, and a couple other housing projects that are out there. So we're excited. At the same time, we know we got work to do.
Right. Well, SBAM, in our new home that we've shared here, 15 years, this will be our home for the next 15 years. Of course, the real estate company that handled the whole transition, Martin Commercial Real Estate. And by the way, 15 years ago, when SBAM was in the same position, also Martin Commercial Real Estate has been the company that's walked right alongside us the last 2 times that we've had a major change in our needs in real estate. Thanks so much, Van, for joining us and sharing your expertise today.
Thank you for being a client. We appreciate your support.
All right, very good.
Okay.
All right, yes, thanks, Van, and thanks for that great segue into our AI webinar pitch. I hope you guys will join us on Thursday. Like Brian said, it's going to be super informational, and there'll even be an opportunity for you to ask questions. So tune in on Thursday. All right.
Good. So we'll try to get Jamie down. Thank you. I know you all got to run. Appreciate it. You bet. See you. Bye.
All right. So Brian, dust has settled on the legislative session. I think you've had some time to maybe digest the energy package specifically. So can you unpack some of the implications and expectations going forward?
Yeah, there are two aspects that were concerning. That one that we talked a lot about on here, but I want to dig into a little bit more, and then another one that I think is fairly new that has not been discussed much. The first is the idea of will natural gas be a part of our energy portfolio or not? So right now, about 34% of our energy is generated by natural gas plants. There are about 60 of them across the state. And this is a lot, as coal has gone offline, natural gas has come online, a very low emission form of fossil fuel. And so this big debate was whether or not now it's time to get rid of that. And what do you do for baseload that's reliable and portable, and that could be increased or decreased on demand, as opposed to, say, wind or solar, which is not always going to be available at the times and at the amounts that you need. So we were concerned about the idea of going to 100% renewable standard. So before it was passed, they changed and said, hey, gas can still be a part of it in the future under certain circumstances, the main circumstance being 100% carbon capture. And it might sound like, oh, good, well, you can use that. Therefore, it'll be fine for the future. But the problem is the technology and the expense around carbon capture, especially for such a low emission type of energy in the first place, is very expensive and not proven in this type of use yet. So in all of the world, I believe that there's only one energy plant one plant that makes electricity that has carbon capture technology that's even deployed. It's a coal plant in Canada. That's the only one. And then in terms of a gas plant, they're going to try it. They're going to try it in 2027 in a gas plant, according to permits anyway, in Texas. So it's that far before it's even planned. But in Michigan, the idea that all natural gas, which is a third of our electricity portfolio, would have to capture 100% of carbon. Again, it's just not commercially even available, the technology to do it. It's being tried. It'll be tried pretty soon. But whether or not the schedule is even possible is not something known, because again, it's the regulation is ahead of the available technology. So that's the one we've talked some about. I just wanted to peel back the levels on that a little bit. The one that we haven't talked a lot about is energy storage. And in terms of being able to go more toward renewable energy, relies on a way to create energy and then store that energy until you need it. Now, there are ways that is done today. Consumers Energy has up in Ludington has a pumping station. Technically, that's the world's largest battery. During the evening, when electricity usage is small, they pump energy into this reservoir, which is high, and then during the day, when energy use is higher, they let the water run out of the reservoir through turbines and make energy when the demand is higher. That is technically a form of a battery. But in batteries like you and I think, like a Duracell battery, or the battery on a phone, or the battery in a car, that sort of thing, that type of technology, saving large amounts of energy for long periods of time, is the technology is just not there. This bill that just passed requires that the utility companies develop the ability to store 2,500 megawatts of energy. Again, it's not, I mean, technically it might be possible if you just made the largest batteries ever, but even for long periods of time, to store that much energy for long periods of time, it's just not commercially viable at this point. We're still trying to figure out how to make cars and trucks go hundreds of miles without a charge, let alone being able to power a state. And so these are really the concerns of the energy. It's not the ultimate goal. Whether or not they can get to zero carbon emissions, it's not really SBAM's issue. It's a matter of, will electricity be affordable and reliable? And these types of regulations that rely on technology that doesn't exist will require huge amounts of investments into research that may or may not pay off, but will definitely get billed to consumers. And at the end of the day, will they be able to do it? I would say it'd be understatement to say it's an open question. So those are really the concerns. The good news is these are multi-year. It's a multi-year staged process, and hopefully it will not be another bite at the apple in the future to try to get this legislation maybe moderated a bit, so that it at least relies on technology that is possible and currently available.
All right, well, thanks for some additional insight there. Let's now move on to outbound migration. There's some recent reports that kind of show where Michigan is losing people to, and then shows kind of where we are gaining people from as well. So what can you tell us?
As you might imagine, that population migration is it's a very complex issue. You don't just like all lose or all gain. There's people coming and going all the time. The question is, do we have more people coming than going? Michigan has now 3 years in a row had outbound migration. Okay, so 2022 we had outbound, 2021, and 2020. So 3 years in a row outbound migration. This year was actually a little less than the previous year. When I say this year, I mean 2022. So in 2022, we had just short of about 10,000 people net leave the state. So that many more people leave than came in. The previous year was about 15,000, and then it was about 20,000 before. So actually less than the last couple of years, but still net losers. Now, the bigger question, I think the more interesting question, is where are we losing to? Where are we losing more than we're gaining? And where are we gaining more than we're losing? And this has changed over time. In fact, it's changed pretty substantially, especially with Illinois. So there was a time, actually, when I was getting out of college, boy, we lost a lot of people to Illinois. We actually gained from Illinois. It's one of the top 3 states that we gain people from, people going from Illinois to Michigan. The other 2 that we are bigger gainers of on a net basis, California and New York. Now, where are we losing people to? Really it's the Southeast. So Florida and Georgia and Tennessee being 3 that we lose to, also Texas. So when you look at those types of migration patterns, on the one hand, you look at it and say, outbound migration on a net basis is slowing, but still negative. So still a big problem, still a big concern. But as we look at where we're winning and where we're losing, you can see pretty clearly a pattern emerging. And it wasn't really that long ago when those migration patterns looked quite different. So in change, there's always opportunity. And in this case, I think it really makes sense for us to dig a little deeper and understand why people are coming and why they're leaving. And by the way, there's a lot of discussion, and even on a commission that's looking at this right now. But I don't think it has to be that complicated. I think a big component is to actually just ask people. This is one thing I really wish that government could get a little bit more direct on, and not try to divine intents or purposes or to fit agendas into being solutions to problems, but instead, people are moving. People came to Michigan. Why'd you come? What brought you here? People left Michigan. Why'd you leave? You can't get perfect information that way, but it's comes closer to being perfect than guessing or trying to divine those interests. So the work continues, but population still major concern for Michigan heading into our future.
All right. Well, thanks, Brian. That is our show for today. We appreciate you tuning in, and we will see you back here Thursday at 3 p.m. Have a great week.
Thanks, everybody. See you on Thursday.